This video is brought to you by Loot Crate, the monthly subscription box for epic geek and gamer items, plus pop culture gear. Making a movie is a long and arduous process, apparently, what do I know? And along the road, a lot of concepts are abandoned and don't make it into the final film. Marvel's latest Doctor Strange is no exception to this. So what I'd like to do today is go through all of the early ideas, alternate castings, deleted scenes, and some different outcomes for various characters in different iterations of the movie. Also, at the end, as always, I'll be giving away a Loot Crate, which is pretty loot great. That's spelled G-R-A-T-E. Doesn't make sense, but it rhymes. And we're starting now, no turning back! Alright, although Benedict Cumberbatch was apparently the top choice for the role, we've had confirmation that Joaquin Phoenix was also being considered, but the story goes he was reluctant to sign on for 6 or so future projects. Other rumoured names that haven't been confirmed include Ethan Hawke, Jared Leto, Oscar Isaac, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Ewan McGregor. Patrick Dempsey has also been very vocal about wanting the role in the past, but I don't know, he's got great hair, some of the best in the biz, but I just don't think, that works. Casting the Ancient One was considered a bit of a lose-lose scenario for Marvel, and they chose to move away from an Asian actor for reasons I'll elaborate on in a sec. Rumoured to be considered for the part were Morgan Freeman, Bill Nighy, and Ken Watanabe, but ultimately, Tilda Swinton was chosen in the knowledge that it would upset some people, but it would also dodge a number of other potential race-related problems. Writer C. Robert Cargill addressed this issue a few months ago in an interview with Double Toasted.
The Ancient One was a racist stereotype. Who comes from a region of the world that is in very weird political place. He originates from Tibet. So if you acknowledge that Tibet is a place and that he's Tibetan, you risk alienating 1 billion people who think that that's bullshit. And risk the Chinese government going, hey, one of the biggest film watching countries in the world, we're not going to show your movie because you decided to get political. I've seen a lot of people, the thing that makes me pull my hair out is, some people are like, well, why not cast Michelle Yeoh? Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, first of all, Michelle Yeoh is awesome. I would love to make a film with Michelle Yeoh. If you are telling me that you think it's a good idea to cast a Chinese actress as a Tibetan character, you are out of your damn fool mind and have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. We just kind of used a Tibetan actor, and it was still an Ancient One, but it was much less racist, or hopefully not racist at all. People would still be like, well, that's the hope, But people would still be, oh, it's another white guy goes to the Orient and adopts their ways and then comes back and is the great white hero story. It's Avatar all over again. It's The Last Samurai all over again. So you're going to get dinged on that.
Doctor Strange wasn't also always to be an origin story either. Marvel toyed with the idea of kicking off the movie with him established already as the Sorcerer Supreme, with some elements of his backstory being touched upon. When it came down to it, his origin was considered too interesting not to include, and it was ultimately decided that they go with it. Despite Marvel wanting to move away from traditional origin stories for newer characters like, Spider-Man, which I can understand. If I have to see Uncle Ben get shot one more time, I'll just complain about it a bit on the internet, which I am wont to do. Scott Derrickson campaigned hard for the director's position and considered himself a good a shot as any when taking into account the risks Marvel have already taken on directors like James Gunn as well as the Russo brothers. He outlined a number of action sequences in order to give a good sense of what his vision entailed. He hasn't mentioned the specific things that didn't make it in, but he did say the fight Strange has in the astral plane as he's being operated on was his idea, which he took directly from the Oath. A number of additional scenes were shot that may make it onto the Blu-ray. Scott Derrickson opened up to Collider about one in particular, an element from the comic that adds to the backstory of Strange, and included his younger sister, April.
I'll talk about one. We shot a scene, in the comics, if you know the comics well, Strange has a backstory where his sister died when he was young, and that she drowned, and that had a real significant effect and probably was instrumental in him becoming a doctor. And we shot that scene, and I loved that scene. It was a really great scene. It just didn't fit in the movie. It felt like it didn't work. But the scene, self-contained scene by itself, I thought was great. And Lulu, who, forgetting her last name, who's the little girl in Ouija, who was was in Deliver Us from Evil, plays the girl So I hope that scene's on the DVD. I like that scene.
Another sequence that may have been cut was a fight between the students of the Ancient One and the disciples of Caecilius. The character of Tina Minoru appears very briefly in the film, along with a number of other minor sorcerers. Linda Duan, who played her, trained in the martial art of Shotokan Karate 3 times a week leading up to this production for what appeared to be an unspecified action sequence. It's been speculated that it would have been a moment where all the various sorcerai were slaughtered, including Wong, as opposed to that all happening off screen. This makes sense also when you look at the prequel comic, as a lot of these people make extended appearances, and perhaps that's because we were initially to see more of them. Or perhaps not. You decide. Or remain indifferent. The first version was also considered a little too way out there for Marvel, as it was thought the starting point was a little too complicated for audiences. That being said, a number of those ideas might be showing up in the sequel. And speaking of, although Scott Derrickson won't really have a hand in what the Russo brothers do with Stephen Strange in Infinity War, he does have an idea in his mind about how Strange would interact with the rest of the team.
I think he'd get along well with Cap, you know? I think that, because I think Strange is not ego-driven. The way he was. I think he, I love the way that at the end, of the movie, the spoiler, can I say this? Is a spoiler? I probably shouldn't on camera. But he's still broken, he's still a broken person. And he's been humbled in the movie. And I love the fact that that's who he is. But at the same time, he's just not going to be intimidated by people. So somebody like Captain America, I think he would appreciate Cap's moral code and desire to do what's right. I think he would respect Captain America. That's my feeling.
That's a great answer.
I think Groot would irritate the hell out of him.
One of the most memorable sequences, for me at least, was the Dormammu I've Come to Bargain final showdown. It involves Strange basically trapping them both in a time loop that he could break if need be if they ended up reaching an agreement. In the film, it looks as if he's murdered only a handful of times before Dormammu gives up in frustration like some kind of giant purple baby monster. There was, however, a line from Strange that didn't make it in that went something like, "We've been through this 1,000 times." Derrickson liked the idea that it was this long stalemate that ended when Dormammu realized he wasn't going to escape, so he ends up conceding. And we kind of get that in the final film, but I think including this may have benefited the movie as it highlights the sacrifice Strange makes in order to protect the world. But speaking of villains, Dormammu wasn't always the first choice. Nightmare was considered. However, Kevin Feige vetoed the idea. He thought that introducing the dream dimension, which is essentially a place you go in your sleep to be tormented, was a challenging idea to get across. And because this movie already had a lot of, this is some shoes, this is a mirror world, this is a magic space rock, it could end up complicating things. And Dormammu made the most sense because he's also the most present villain in the Strange comics. The film also ends with the position of the Ancient One open. Now, traditionally, Doctor Strange eventually takes on the role of Sorcerer Supreme a decade or so later after his comic run began. There was, however, a version of the script where he became the Sorcerer Supreme by the end, but it felt too premature. It was thought if he had risen through the ranks of the Kamar-Taj and then taken on the New York Sanctum like he does, plus then be given that position, it would have all felt a little rushed. Especially considering this movie takes place over the course of a year, I just discovered. I thought it began sometime around the Avengers in 2012 and ended after Civil War, but it actually goes autumn to autumn. Go figure. There was also some deliberation on whether or not the Ancient One would live or die by the time everything wraps up, but in the end, she did die. Spoiler alert, but you've probably seen it, and if you haven't, spoiler alert. Okay, a couple of final things. Dan Harmon was brought on when additional photography was being planned out. I guess they thought they wanted to add some snappier dialogue to kind of brighten things up a little. And who's a better guy to get for snappy dialogue than the guy behind both Community and Rick and Morty?
Wubba lubba dub dub! And that's the way the news goes. Uh-oh, somersault jump. AIDS! Lick, lick, lick my balls! Ha ha ha! Yeah!
Also, you know how in the comics Doctor Strange says all of his incantations out loud, as well as waving his hands about? Well, the vocal part of that was abandoned because it was thought it's one of those things that looks awesome in the comics, but it's kind of dumb when you say it out loud. And I'm sure you'll agree. Or are indifferent. Finally, it was Michael Giacchino's composition that played over the end credits called Master of the Mystic something or other. Derrickson considered using Interstellar Overdrive for this, but that ended up in the car crash sequence. But initially he wanted Jimi Hendrix's Are You Experienced? The Hendrix family, however, wanted to see the film before it was released, which wasn't possible due to time constraints. Plus it would have cost them $500,000 for that song. And Marvel would have been like, hey, no way, that's $200,000 more than we paid Chris Evans for the first Captain America movie. Which is true. That's a true thing. Okay, before I give away a loot crate, let's talk about Loot Crate in the form of this advertisement. In the spirit of Doctor Strange, This month's Loot Crate is magic themed and comes with 6 to 8 exclusive items of licensed gear, apparel, collectibles, including Doctor Strange, Game of Thrones, and magical beasts. Have you seen them? Where are they? Oh wait, they're just in the case. Head on over to lootcrate.com/Mr. Sunday Movies and enter promo code Mr. Sunday Movies, all one word, for 10% off any box. Right, if you're this person, congratulations. You won the Loot Crate from last week. Just private message me these details on my channel and it's all yours. And if you want to win this week's box, just leave any comment below. It can be on what you would have liked to have seen make the final cut from all this stuff that I've talked about, or even some ideas of your own. This is a safe space to share your thoughts. Generally, also it's YouTube, so it's a bit of a shit show. Also, if you're keen, I've got a pretty extensive Doctor Strange Easter egg video. You can click that even on touchscreen. It works. It's like magic, like Doctor Strange, like the movie we're talking about. We're talking about it now. Or even if you want, check out my podcast, linked below, The Weekly Planet, where this Monday we are ranking the 6 comic book movies from 2016 from worst to best. Or best to worst. I don't know yet, we haven't recorded it. But in the meantime, thanks for watching this. I appreciate you checking it out. All the best. Take care.